Okay, so you want to buy a luxury watch brand. Here's the thing nobody tells you walking into this. The object itself is almost pointless. A $10 Casio keeps better time than a $30,000 Patek Philippe. Doesn't matter. You're not selling time, you're selling permission. Permission to signal that you can wait years for something and not care. And yet the businesses that sell this permission are, on average, barely profitable. Richemont, the group that owns Cartier, IWC, Piaget, Vacheron Constantin, reported its specialist watchmaking division ran on a 3.4% operating margin last year, down from 5.3% the year before. That's not a typo. A division full of watches that retail for the price of a house, and the company is basically breaking even on making them. So how does that math work? Let's find out. First, the price list. 3 ways in. Cheapest entry, by a distressed independent brand. Ebel is the textbook case. The founding family went 195 million francs into debt in the early 90s from bad outside investments and was forced to sell in 1994. The brand bounced to Investcorp, then LVMH bought it in 1999, fighting off Swatch Group for the privilege. By 2003, LVMH had had enough. It sold Ebel to Movado for $48.9 million, eating an €85.6 million capital loss on the way out. A famous name, bought and resold like a foreclosed house. Middle tier. Launch from scratch using an outsourced movement. Buy calibers from ETA or Sellita instead of building your own. That runs maybe $2 to $5 million to get a real collection, tooling, and a launch campaign off the ground. This is how most independent micro brands you see advertised actually work. Top tier. Build a true in-house manufacture. Design and produce your own movement from a blank sheet. Minimum investment, just for the movement itself, is around €3 million. With complications and years of development, that runs into the tens of millions. This is the tier collectors actually respect. It's also the tier that quietly bankrupts people. Now, the rules of the game before you're even allowed to play. Rule 1. Swiss made is a legal label, not a marketing phrase. At least 60% of your production costs have to be incurred in Switzerland, and the movement has to be assembled and inspected there. Skip that, and you're not a luxury brand. You're a novelty item with a nice font. Rule 2, and this one's brutal. For decades, the company that made the movements almost everyone else needed, ETA, was owned by Swatch Group. Your direct competitor controlled your supply chain. Regulators eventually forced Swatch to keep supplying rivals through 2019. But by then, half the independent brands had either built their own movements or quietly disappeared. Rule 3. Distribution isn't a store, it's a relationship. Authorized dealers openly practice what the trade calls bundling. You don't get sold the Daytona you actually want until you bought jewelry, a slower-moving Rolex, a Tudor, something first. Trade presses called it predatory. It's also just how allocation works. Rule 4. You're not just building a watch, you're building a 50-year service commitment. Spare parts and repairs for models you stopped selling decades ago. Skip that infrastructure, and the resale market punishes you. A watch nobody can service is a watch nobody wants used. Which brings us to how the money gets made. A finished ETA-based movement can cost a brand as little as a few $100s. Case it, finish it, put a crown on the dial, and it retails for $5,000 to $15,000. That spread looks obscene. It isn't, once you subtract R&D amortization, boutique rent, and the marketing budget for the Formula One driver wearing it on a red carpet. That marketing line runs deeper than people think. Rolex paid roughly $10 million a year as Formula One's timekeeper in 2011, climbing to $50 million. LVMH outbid them anyway, agreeing to pay F1 around $150 million a year starting in 2025 for Tag Heuer. That's the price of just being visible, before you've sold a single watch. Here's the real mechanism though, scarcity. A steel Rolex Daytona retails for somewhere between $13,150 and $16,900. On the secondary market, the same watch trades for $25,000 to $40,000, sometimes double retail. The wait at an authorized dealer runs 2 to 5 years. Rolex could make more Daytonas. It doesn't. Because the day everyone who wants one can just walk in and buy one, the watch stops being worth $40,000 to a stranger on the resale market. And the whole engine that makes people want it in the first place breaks.
Patek Philippe ran the same play, on purpose, in 2021. The steel Nautilus 5711 was its best-selling watch on Earth, retailing around $34,893 for the green dial version. Instead of making more, President Thierry Stern killed the reference outright. He said flooding the market with cheap relative steel watches was dangerous for the brand's profitability. Within a year, that same green dial 5711 was changing hands for roughly $360,000. 10 times retail, generated entirely by Patek choosing to stop manufacturing its own hit product. That's the paradox at the center of the industry. Undersupply isn't a flaw, it's the business model. Now, the architecture underneath all of this, the part nobody sees from the boutique window. Richemont's watch division carries 8 separate subscale brands: IWC, Piaget, Vacheron Constantin, Jaeger-LeCoultre, and more. Each one running its own movement R&D, its own marketing, its own boutiques. None has the volume to spread those fixed costs the way one mega brand could. That's a structural reason the division limps along at a 3.4% margin, while Cartier, sitting in Richemont's jewelry division, not even counted as a watch brand internally, runs an operating margin around 31%. Same parent company. One arm makes real money selling rings. The other arm is a prestige project that happens to also sell watches. Compare that to Swatch Group, which owns Omega, Longines, and Blancpain alongside entry-level Swatch itself. In 2024, it pulled roughly 7.89 billion francs in revenue at close to a 15% margin, nearly 5 times Richemont's watch division. The difference: Swatch builds movements at scale across dozens of brands and every price point, so $75 plastic watches subsidize 6-figure Blancpains. There's a whole second business riding on top of this that the brands don't even own: resale platforms. Chrono 24, the largest, was processing roughly 15 billion euros a year in watch transactions and has itself been valued north of $1 billion. The brands created the scarcity. Someone else built a billion-dollar company just taxing the frenzy. Meanwhile, the two most dominant names in the entire industry, Rolex and Patek Philippe, aren't public companies at all. Rolex is owned by the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation. Patek Philippe is owned outright by the Stern family. Neither has to report a quarterly margin to anyone or justify running factories under capacity on purpose. They can play the scarcity game with a patience that a public company's shareholders would never tolerate. Now the cases. Success, sort of. Rolex, precisely because it refuses to behave like a normal company. No shareholders demanding growth. No pressure to flood the market and cash in early. Every decision optimized for exactly one thing: a waiting list, forever. It's arguably the least capitalist watch company in the industry, and it's also the most profitable. Failure number 1. Ebel, the story we already walked through. A family firm run into 9-figure debt by bad outside bets, passed between 3 owners in under a decade, and finally offloaded at a loss so large LVMH just wanted it gone. Failure number 2. Uglier. Frank Muller. Founder Frank Muller partnered with Geneva casemaker Vartan Sermakis in 1991, and the brand exploded. Record auction prices, celebrity clientele. Then in 2003, the partnership collapsed publicly. Muller accused Sermakis of quietly sourcing cheap Russian and Japanese movements, stripped of markings, and putting them in watches marketed as exclusive Swiss haute horlogerie. The two settled, with Muller walking back the allegations. But the damage to the idea that Swiss-made always means what the price tag implies never fully went away. So, the calculation. Optimistic scenario. Outsourced movement route. $2 to $5 million in, tight niche positioning, no boutique network, selling direct online to collectors. Build real demand and you can reach profitability inside a few years. That's basically the micro-brand playbook, and at small scale, it works. Realistic scenario. You try to build a true manufacturer brand and compete at the top. Tens of millions in movement R&D before you see $1 of revenue. A boutique network running $5,000 to $80,000 a month in rent per location. And even if you execute everything right, you're likely landing near that industry-wide 3.4% operating margin. The number Richemont's entire watch division posts after literal decades in the business. Put $50 million into building a manufacturer brand, and you may spend the next 20 years fighting for single-digit margins that a mid-tier jewelry line generates without trying. So here's the closing thought. You'd assume the watch business is where the real money sits in luxury. It's the one with the waiting lists, the auction records, the 8-figure grail pieces. But inside the very conglomerates that own these brands, watches are frequently the least profitable division on the balance sheet. The real money, in the building next door, is jewelry, at 31% margins, made by the same company, sold in the same boutique. Run the number a different way. Put that same $50 million into an S&P 500 index fund instead, averaging even a conservative 7% a year, and 2 decades later, you've roughly quadrupled it. No boutique leases, no movement R&D, no Vartan Sermakis-style lawsuits along the way. The watch brand might hand you a legacy. The index fund, historically, hands you the money. Which means the actual lesson of owning a luxury watch brand isn't about mechanical precision or Swiss heritage at all. It's this: if you want the prestige, buy the watch. If you want the profit, buy the ring.